Thank you for joining us for the Weaning on a Cow's Milk and Soya-Free Diet. And I will let the presenters introduce themselves.
Thank you, Marianne. My name is Alison Booth and I'm one of the community paediatric dietitians working in Somerset.
I'm Heidi Sieber. I'm one of the paediatric dietitians working at Taunton and Somerset NHS Trust.
Thank you. So we have a range of handouts, I understand. What sort of handouts have we got, Heidi?
So there's a range of handouts that are designed to support this webinar. There's several IMAP guidelines that look at initial fact sheets for parents, home reintroduction to confirm milk allergy recipes. There's also several milk-free diet sheets that are produced by the FASG, which are milk-free diet for infants and children, and also a milk and soya-free diet for infants and children. And it's just to highlight that these booklets are only available after completing the post-webinar survey.
Download this when you want, apart from, as Heidi says, the ones in pink do need to watch the whole webinar to be able to access those.
So in terms of when you should wean your baby, the World Health Organization guidance is from 6 months of age. However, it's important to also go by the signs that your baby is giving you, as some infants will be ready for weaning just before 6 months of age, so between that 4 to 6 window. The general signs are that your baby will be able to have suitable head control, so their chin is not flopping down to their chest. They can hold the right position for introducing solids. It's important that they're also showing an interest in food when other family members are eating.
So trying to grab the food and
just generally interested in meal times and what other people are eating. And if you are introducing solids before 6 months, so between that 4 to 6 month window, you would start your child on baby rice or fruits and vegetables, and that will be mixed with the infant formula or breast milk.
Okay, that's great, thank you. What about weaning dairy-free and what to avoid? There's an awfully long list there, isn't there?
Yeah, and milk comes in lots of different forms under different names with the different proteins. So there's casein and whey-based proteins that may be used. There's lactose, which is the milk sugar. So it's important that all of these are looked at when you're looking at ingredients list, because there will be signs that milk protein is present in the food.
Okay, but again, we've got lactose, which is the milk sugar, and casein whey, which is the protein. And with dairy allergy, it's the casein whey we're interested in, not the lactose, which is the sugar. It's just the protein.
Absolutely, but most products that have one item in, so something that might have lactose in, is more likely to also contain
so it's a
protein.
sign.
So you need to be aware of the different sources.
A sign you need to watch out. Okay.
Absolutely.
And what about soya? There's again a very large list of soya products to avoid. I mean, I get the impression now legally everything's very clearly labelled. You don't have to understand all these different names. It should say milk or soya in bold on a product if it's got it in.
Yes, it should say on the ingredients list, it should be highlighted in bold, and then usually under the allergy guidance it will also state may contain or recipe contains milk, so it should be clearly identified on a label.
So it's not necessary for parents to sort of memorise all these different names, is it?
No, I think it's important that parents have an awareness though of the different names that milk comes under, or that it should be identified on bold. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And what's the relevance of the orange block?
So with soya oil, if it's a highly refined oil, then usually the soya proteins have been removed. However, it's very difficult to tell that on an ingredients list or in a product. So we would generally say, unless you can guarantee that that's a highly refined oil, you would also need to avoid soya oil. Equally with lecithin, lecithin can come from 3 different sources. So it can be soya based, it can be egg based, or it can be nut based. So again, it's only the soya lecithin that you need to avoid, but unless clearly labelled as soya lecithin, you would need to be careful with lecithin if it's just labelled on its own.
Okay, that sounds good, and a good warning for people as well. What about the different apps available for parents to use?
Well, these are a couple of apps, the Food Maestro and the Spoon Guru apps. They're both free to download, and parents have found these invaluable because, as Heidi mentioned, you don't need to memorise all the different names for what means milk and what means soya with these particular apps. So you download them, you register, you tick what allergen you would like to avoid, and then you can use them on your phone as a barcode scanner. And you can use them for all the major supermarkets, such as Sainsbury's, Tesco, Asda, the Co-op, Morrison's, as well as any branded foods. But at the moment, they currently don't work in 3 supermarkets, and that's Lidl, Aldi and Marks and Spencer's. You would need to check the labels each and every time you would buy something, certainly in those supermarkets. But as Heidi mentioned, on the labels, these products, if they do contain the allergens, they should be written in bold or underlined or in italics, so that it's obvious that that particular offending product might have milk or soya present.
So we're talking about using the camera on a mobile phone,
Yes.
and scanning the barcodes on the back of foods. And
Yes.
with this app, that will immediately ping up and tell you whether it's got dairy or soya.
It will, absolutely. They're really useful, and I would definitely recommend that parents download them. They're free to use, free to download and to use, and definitely a great resource.
Okay, that's fantastic. What about added to weaning foods from 6 months of age?
So this is a question that we get asked to us very often. What can I add when I'm weaning my baby? Do I have to use their formula? Well, you can use breast milk or express breast milk, or you can use your child's main formula. Whereas lots of children will have product, so something like baby rice, they might have it mixed in with a little bit of soy milk, such as the Alpro Soya growing up milk, but not every baby will accept that mixed in with formula. So it is definitely one thing for a baby to drink the formula, it's another thing to have it mixed in with food. And these are often very well accepted. So I would definitely recommend, from a weaning point of view, added to weaning foods from 6 months, that you would look at something like the Alpro Soya growing up milk, or their baby doesn't tolerate soya, then look at the Oatly Barista, or also the Cocoa Super. And those would be the 3 that would have the more similar calories to cow's milk, but there are some other ones available there. You can see the oat milk from Marks and Spencer's and Asda also do a long life oat milk, but they do tend to be a bit lower in calories than cow's milk. So it really depends if your child is gaining weight well, and it depends how much you're using as well. So, but there are lots of different products now that you can add into your baby's food when you're weaning.
Okay, that's great. And what about from sort of 12 months of age?
Well, generally from 12 months, it's important that we start thinking that your child is moving on from their infant formula. So infant formula is suitable up to 12 months, but generally from 12 months we would tend to have those prescriptions discontinued, because children can then move on to the over-the-counter milk substitutes. And again, the Alpro Soya growing up milk, or the Oatly Barista, or you might also hear it being called Oatly Foamable, or the Cocoa Super, or like I say, the other oat-based drinks from Marks and Spencer's or Asda. But again, they are a little bit lower in calories and protein. So it's just being aware of this.
Okay, that's great.
And then when your child is 18 months, then generally they can move on to any other regular calcium fortified soya, oat, coconut, almond milk. These do tend to be much lower in calories, but again, milk becomes a much less important part of the child's diet. So really you're probably looking at a cup maybe in the morning, and then, or maybe on their cereal, and then before they go to bed. To remember to check the labels every time you buy a product. We are always asked, why don't we provide a list of products that people can buy? And that's simply because the manufacturers change the ingredients more often than you would realise, and we just really can't keep up to date with that. It's much better to give parents the tools to be able to check the labels every single time. But there are a few things to be aware of. In particular, looking at organic products, they will not be fortified with calcium, so by law they can't add anything to those. So it is really important that if you are giving your child something that is organic, that you make sure that they do have calcium from other sources, because that particular milk substitute will not have anything added to it. Also, rice milk, we don't recommend it as a main drink for children under 5, because there's a higher naturally occurring arsenic content. With coconut milks, it's also worthwhile checking the labels, because some of them contain a significant amount of rice milk. And again, I said in the point before, we wouldn't generally recommend that. And with the dairy-free cheeses and cream alternatives, a lot of them are fortified with calcium, but a lot of them aren't. So again, it's worthwhile checking the labels to make sure that you're giving your child what you think you're giving them. So if you're giving them a dairy-free cheese that might be soy-based or coconut-based, just check and see whether or not it's actually fortified with calcium. And it's also worthwhile noting as well that you can give your child dairy-free puddings, things like custards, from 6 months of age, which actually help to add variety to your child's diet. And also, if they need a few extra calories, it's a good way of getting them in. And you don't have to buy particular special jars and special puddings, because you can actually make your own very, very simply by substituting your normal recipe, substituting it for things like dairy-free or soy-free margarine, and using the milk substitute that you would normally give your child.
Okay, so it's not necessary to go out and buy jar or ready produced food. It's quite simple. Just use your food you're using normally, but substitute the dairy.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. A lot of these special products are quite expensive, and I would say not necessary. You don't need to buy them. They're handy to have in the cupboard now and again, but it's not something that they need to buy.
And also the palatability and the taste and the ability for the child to swallow, etc., is much better with home produced food. It's
definitely
more lumpy and more normal.
Definitely, certainly from a flavour point of view, products that you would make at home, homemade cooking is definitely much more tasty. And there's also some evidence around children who are fussy eaters, actually, if they're eating more home cooked food, they're much less likely to be fussy than they are if they're having a lot of jarred and pre-prepared foods. So yes, home cooking as much as we can.
So what about iodine?
So iodine is needed for brain development in children, and the main source of iodine in the UK diet is from dairy. So obviously if you're on a milk-free diet, it's quite hard to get the recommended amount of iodine in your diet. But some non-dairy sources of iodine, you do find them in things like white fish, in particular haddock and cod, also in eggs, meat and seaweed. But obviously if you're dairy free, then it's going to be much harder. So if at all possible and your child's accepting them, I would recommend that you try and give your child some white fish once or twice a week. And it's also worth noting that some of the milk substitutes do contain iodine, but not all of them do. So certainly the Alpro Soya growing up milk, the 1 to 3, that junior product, that does contain iodine, as well as the Asda Long Life milk and the Marks and Spencer's oat milk, and also the Cocoa Super. They've all got added iodine. Finally, another little note on baby vitamins. So this is not specific to babies who have got a milk or soya allergy. The recommendations, government recommendations, are that all breastfed babies are given baby vitamins from birth, and also formula-fed babies that are taking less than 17 ounces of formula a day, and also children between the ages of 1 to 5 years. And there's a whole host available. You just need to ask your pharmacist or have a little look in the supermarket. These are all liquid preparations for the infants, so under 12 months, and then you've got some of the baby chewy vitamins that you can give to children over 3. And also, please don't forget our other webinars. So we've got one on the specialist infant formula, and also a webinar on how to perform a milk or a soya challenge. And we've also got a webinar with one of our doctor colleagues looking at frequently asked questions from parents. And finally, just to go through the handouts again, so that's the list of the handouts that they have available, but just to highlight the 2 in the bottom in the pink, they can only be available after you've completed the post-webinar survey.
And don't forget to complete the survey. It's step 2 in the process, really, really important. And we'd be really grateful if you could complete that. It makes a huge difference and will really direct what information you want to know more about in the future so that we can create more webinars. And so please do fill those in. And thank you very much for listening.